team, thank you so much for joining us this week. I assume you all had a little notification to say there's a new episode because by this point in the season you must have subscribed by now. Make sure you find us everywhere. Wherever you get your content, we'll be there, so follow us there as well. Short and sweet intro from me this week. Today we're discussing if we're failing our juniors. We're going to look at what it's actually like to be a junior creative in 2024, what it's like hiring juniors, what we're looking for from them as an industry. We're going to ask who's setting them up to succeed, whose responsibility is it, who's helping them fail, as negative as that sounds. We're going to hear from lots of listeners in this one, and of course from our lovely, lovely guests. So welcome both. I'll leave you to introduce yourselves. Dines, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, good to see you guys. I'm Dines, creative director and co-founder at Studio BLUP. Studio BLUP is a creative company specializing in 3D, web, motion, but we're known for our specific style and our brand and our design ethos. We've worked with the world's biggest brands such as Nike, Adidas, Dior, Gucci, all the usual. And yeah, we are on a mission to change the industry by empowering young creatives to find their way in the industry and yeah, shine like a star.
Hi, I'm Ellen Ling. I am a copywriter and I run my own gig called LINGO. So technically sort of freelance writer, working, kind of across different industries, directly with agencies, with studios, with small businesses and brands, doing all kind of things with words. That's me.
So before we get into it, you might be bored of my voice in your headphones at this point, but in case you're new here, I'm Katie Cadwell, your host, founder and CD of Lucky Dip. My pronouns are she, her. My role today, honestly, is to interject as little as possible, unless I'm relaying some of our really brilliant submissions. So let's get started. I want to kick us off with, what is a junior designer? I wanted to find out what the ask is of a junior today. So producer Hattie very dutifully scanned some job adverts. So I'm just going to read out a bit of a summary of what is a junior role even looking for. So we've got a junior digital designer role for Urban Outfitters, someone who strives for efficiency, process, detail-driven perfectionist, must be able to react quickly, multitask, partner, collaborate. Hands-on design role with a superb sense of typography, strong concepts, attention to detail. You'll need to be highly proficient in InDesign, all Adobe Creative Suite, detail-oriented and highly organized, advanced understanding of digital formats across screen sizes and devices. I don't even have all this. Good understanding of web technologies and standards, expert, just want to underline that word, expert in creating web-ready artwork. It goes on. Motion graphic and video editing knowledge are a plus, so you've got to be 30 to apply for this role, right? I wanted to read out one that was junior/mid-role because we saw a lot of these. People that it really feels like people don't want to come out and just say midweight because they want to maybe pay a junior salary. Our ideal candidate will have a keen eye for detail and an impressive portfolio, as well as 2 to 4 years experience, good understanding of Adobe Creative Suite, and then they go on to list every single program ever. A natural passion for design and follower of latest trends, great team collaborator, able to work at pace across multiple projects to deliver to strict timelines. That line just puts the fear of God into me. Excellent verbal or written communication skills, so you need to be a copywriter too, confidently and clearly presenting work. I'm really not going to read any more because I think we all get the picture, but to summarise all of the job ads that we read, almost all of them talk about working quickly and working to deadlines, which definitely feels like something that is a newer addition to these job ads. Barely any of them talk about the fact that you will do any type of learning and have any type of growth or progression. And to be honest, they all sound like job specs for midweight designers. Guys, I'm going to throw it back to you. Are you surprised by those?
Not surprised. I'm hurt that I'm not surprised. Obviously, surprised by a junior, anything with junior on it, wanting 2 to 4 years experience. That to me feels pretty comical. Um, I think from everyone that I've spoken to in preparation for this podcast and just, knowing what the scene is like for juniors anyway, the ask seems to be more and more and more. The hyphens seem to be more and more and more. God knows how I'll be able to be a copywriter when all these people are coming in, expert in multi disciplines. And I think that is just a huge a barrier on the barriers that we already have, and it feels like something that's only becoming more and more of a tsunami of kind of intimidating asks of people looking to get that potentially first foot in the door, or first foot in the door after, the kind of graft of potential internships, placements, work experience. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, great points, Helen. And yeah, it's made me pretty sad that's really upset me, because I'm not necessarily looking at job boards, right, for actual brands, right? It's more like agencies, so they have a bit more compassion and a bit more sense. And it feels like this is a Googled search job ads that whoever's written it doesn't understand what they're trying to ask for, right? And I think when I was at university myself, and the first thing one of my good friends told me was, there's hardly going to be any jobs out there in the real world. So this is why I started Studio BLUP for my second year at university, to prepare myself for, if I did leave university, then I have a portfolio and these skills ready to apply for these jobs. And obviously this was 15, 20 years ago, right? But now you're seeing so much competition, and you're seeing so much need for those skills, which is not even relevant for the job, right? So what's going to happen now is a poor junior is going to apply to that job, and they're going to feel under over-pressured again. They're going to apply, and they're going to think they're not good enough, or they're not even going to apply, and then they're just not even going to fall into a design job. And the most concerning thing about that was, what are the benefits of working for the said brand, right? Like you said, there was no training, there's no sort of networking, there's no development, there's no stuff that will help you in your personal life, So as a junior, you're thinking, okay, even if I get this job, what's going to happen next? Am I just going to be worked to the ground? So things do need to change, and I've that's opened my eyes so much, and I've never actually seen that. I've read that, and it really, really got me angry, man. So that's giving a bit of fuel for the episode, And this is what's happening to our young talent, and it's so sad.
I think that you won't be alone in being quite surprised by that. And why would we be reading junior designer ads, right? Unless you're writing one yourself. We did have a few submissions specifically about what industry is expecting and asking for from juniors. So I'm just going to play out a voice note from Jenny Potts, who's creative director at B&B.
But what I do think is more difficult for them is a couple of things, really. The expectation of, young people now being multidisciplined, not just being a graphic designer, but, everyone wants them to have motion skills or illustration skills, visualization skills, digital skills. So, I think this is a case of it's what agencies are being asked for. So a lot of agencies, whether you're big or small, are being asked to do things across the board and across lots of different disciplines within design. So, you're now kind of looking for juniors that can do a bit of everything, or at least have the willingness to learn.
So I think that the big difference, I think, that feels like a real shift is you used to leave uni probably with your ideas and not really the technical skills, right, to execute them, and you would learn those skills on the job. And because of the world that we live in now, it's really expected that you're going to turn up to be like incredibly proficient. And we see lots of multidisciplinary studios, right? So we're asking for multidisciplinary juniors and juniors to be slightly more well-rounded. Like, do we think that that's fair? Do we think that that's a good representation of what the industry generally expects?
I think the industry is slowly evolving into something where I don't think our creatives want to work. We're seeing a lot of talent now going freelance because they are in control of what they want to produce. It's actually funny because one of my best friends, he's worked in agency for the past 20 years, and you know, he's jumping from job to job and slowly climbing that ladder. And you know, I remember when I was 21, and he was on a good salary, and there's me and Alex struggling to even pay for food, right? And fast forward 20 years, Alex and I have achieved so much, in terms of, because we had the freedom to basically build our career, do our thing, have fun, travel around the world, meet amazing people, work with amazing clients. Whereas my friends have just been stuck in agency land, and his talent has been wasted because he felt like he needed that 9 to 5 job and that security. So now I think it's just like how it's a real expectation, and how we position what it means to getting a job straight from university or straight from college as a young creatives. Like, what do you actually want to achieve in this game? Is it financial security and look good on your CV and impress your family and friends and say that you work at this massive agency and this massive brand, or to build legacy with your design and have the freedom and eat, as I say, eat rubbish, eat poo, and start from the bottom and grind your way up to the top and enjoying the journey. So I think there needs to be a more clear trajectory to make sure these young creators know what they're heading into, so they're not shocked and end up just basically chasing nothing.
Al, what do you think about basically that kind of requirement for juniors to be so well-rounded, right, so early on?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of the people that I spoke to, or just, as I say, have conversations with, might be coming from a course that feels, in terms of like the title of the course or what they graduate as, feels quite specific to a discipline or a craft. And so many people still feeling like they're not good enough to go into the industry, or worrying that they're not going to meet this bar, or that they've got imposter syndrome in something that they feel that they've trained in. I think it's interesting, like, I think the culture of creativity, whether it's the industry or just like who we are as creative individuals, is becoming more holistic, and we're all kind of taking on more hyphens, and we all want to have a bit more flexibility and freedom and to explore things. I think part of that is to be encouraged. I don't think to me, it feels like there's a big disconnect between expecting people to be multi-hyphenated and rounded when they don't have the confidence in potentially their kind of core craft. So I think, I really welcome a jack of all trades, like, refuse pigeonholes thing, because to me, that's what keeps it fresh. It stops you becoming complacent. It also keeps some of that curiosity and that spark alive for you as an individual, whatever stage of your career you're at. But I think expecting that, to use the word expert in some of those, to me, I feel like I'm, pretty confident in what I do as a craft. And I would really, really never use the word expert, because I think it instantly feels like I'm saying I've got nothing left to learn. And you're saying that about a job where someone's got everything to learn. Maybe not about, the fundamental entry points of their job, but everything about collaboration, everything about the business side of things, presenting in front of clients. And so there feels like a real disconnect between letting someone have the fundamentals and get that sort of core confidence in your craft and your, job role, before adding all these expectations. That you absolutely support extra training, absolutely be like, you want to have a go at making this mood film, on you go. I think that's always been encouraged. But to me, the experience I've had is where I've wanted to branch out, there's been potentially an adverse reaction to risk, and the risk of like, well, you're the writer, why would I let you do the edit? And so to me, it feels really wild that that's what you're saying. Here we are in the industry. If you want to come in, here's everything we already expect from you. Of course, people are going to be feeling like incredibly insecure.
I think that's a really good point, is we kind of celebrate experts and we celebrate people who have their niche a bit later on in their career, but we're not really leaning into our juniors that come out and they have the confidence and have the know-how to be like, right, I'm going to be a type designer. And this kind of feeling of Jack or Jane of all trades, even that isn't enough sometimes. I've got an anonymous story which is hilarious. I shouldn't say hilarious, but it's just a brilliant read. So from Anonymous, I worked in a small but fairly well-known branding agency where we were lucky to consistently have enough work to need to hire a junior. We were probably actively hiring for the role for over 6 months, and it would seem that nobody was good enough for our CD and DD. They were trying to find someone special, you can't see me with my inverted commas, and that wasn't the same as other designers. I heard them discuss once that they were looking for someone who wasn't just a designer, but also showed their creativity in some other way. So, for example, a junior designer who was also really passionate about learning to code, or made sculptures in their spare time, or was an amateur photographer or director with a short film idea. It was such a ridiculous and unfair brief, all coming from two creatives who had absolutely no extracurricular activities of their own. Savage at the end. But it's such a good point. It's like we're also expecting juniors to hustle or have a side passion or be running an Etsy shop or screen printing t-shirts on the weekend. That's just mad, isn't it?
Okay, I think that raises a really good point. And I think, dare I say it, a part of that is true. I've always encouraged, creatives to become entrepreneurs. Okay, so I started off as a digital artist, but I needed to understand how money worked, how to make money from my creative, how to speak to clients, how to write an email, how to be a bit more diverse in my portfolio. So when I do have those conversations, I can, in a way, inverted commas, blag it and say, yeah, I can do that, right? And at a high level, because the confidence is there. So unfortunately, actually no, fortunately, in this day and age, creatives need to be have a little bit of entrepreneur in them. And sometimes, you might think of it like, you say to yourself, oh, I'm not an entrepreneur. The quest now is to learn how to become one. Is go onto YouTube, is go into your TikToks and understand the basics of what business is. And when you do that, when you're in front of these creative directors and they say, what else can you do? And they show you your Etsy shop or your online merch store. That's extra points, and that's going to get you that job, because you shouldn't just be sitting on your computer just trying to design and focus on one thing. You've got to become rounded. A classic story I had was when I was in second year, when I was at university, I was selling paintings on Amazon, and just designing Disney characters and putting a line through it. And I was making, £300, £400 a week as a student by selling these things on eBay. But what that taught me was to deliver a product that was high quality, to ship it on time, to make sure I'm interacting with my client, and to also shape the way I'm creating my creative. And that, thank goodness, I did that back in the day, because that momentum helped me to this day, helped me build my career to this day.
And I agree with, I don't disagree with anything you've said, but I think in the context of being like a creative and having, whether you want to call it a side hustle or just like interests that you pursue in that entrepreneurial spirit under your own steam, I think that is like, becoming the real norm. I think when it's expected of people in the context of a job application, it's like, at what point is that exploitative? Because I think there's a lot of, juniors need support. It's not right of us to expect them to come in and, understand the inner workings of every brand is different. So they might have been somewhere before that looked completely different process-wise to somewhere else, but they're not going to understand everything that, is more the business side of it, or the kind of inner workings of how agencies or projects run. But if you are asking someone to already justify their pay and their existence in that working ethos by having many hats that justify the time you're going to have to support them with, that to me feels where it's like a little bit manipulative, saying, can you be an illustrator, and can you be this, and can you be this, and can you be this? Because it feels like you're asking someone to justify multiple outputs to warrant needing that, kind of support and guidance and mentorship. And so I think there's a real murky line, because I completely agree with everything you've said. And I think everyone should feel, I think everyone should explore and pursue multiple things that light your creative fire. And I think if you can do that in a business savvy way, like, all for it. And I think there's a little bit of manipulation and exploitation of like, oh, everyone's multi-hyphenated now, and kids are woke and they're doing all these like YouTube tutorials, and if I get them in to be a designer, can they also tick this box, this box, this box, this box, and can they do the social and get my LinkedIn going? And I think that's really dangerous, because it feels like you're saying, oh, you want to be multifaceted, you can be that here. But as I say, coming back to that point of, is anyone confident, especially when you think about the disconnect of kind of, genders in terms of feeling qualified to apply for a job or a role. It's like, that just feels like such an exploitative, murky expectation.
And that's just spot on. I do feel if you do come back from an interview and you do get that feedback and say, you've got a few things missing, then use that as an opportunity to grow and take constructive criticism on board. And for the next interview, you do have that arsenal in the back of your pocket. And I think that's the kind of like the learning curve and the harsh reality of the real world industry, because it's not all unicorns and rainbows out there. It's hard, it's harsh. Yeah. So it's how you survive in that and take that that negative feedback or that positive feedback and take it on board to achieve your eventual goals.
I think it's like, always trying to personally raise the bar, but if that bar is, every time we raise it for them, they all meet it, and then we raise it again, and then we, I want to hear from some students about, we asked on our Instagram to hear from students and recent grads what a junior role means for them and what they were looking for out of a junior role. So we heard things like to learn and be part of a really supportive team, opportunities to grow, to work on really challenging projects, to be encouraged. So quoting pretty much everything that's not in that job ad, right? And they're absolutely more soft skills and a lot more about learning and development, which I suppose isn't surprising, but very different from what we're hearing from industry. And then it gets a little bit sad. When I asked if that was their experience, they said not at all, often felt micromanaged and belittled. I was not valued for my actual skill set. These are people that might have dropped tens and tens of thousands on their education, right? And they're saying they're not being valued for the skills that they have gained for that money. Overworked, underpaid, and my growth felt like something that I had to fight for constantly. Where's it all going wrong? Like, are we surprised to hear this from them?
Again, I don't want to say, when you're reading that out, I feel like I was in a panto. I was like, oh. But for me, that's what I hear time and time again. I used to work at D&AD and was part of the New Blood program. And it was, kind of trying to get people into jobs in a really meaningful way is, something that's not new and certainly is something that we're always striving to make more meaningful. I think if you're talking about sort of like a path from university in, and I'm conscious that's not everyone's path, but if you are talking about that road in, a lot of university and whatever kind of training or vocational training you do is hypothetical, and I think a lot of students really just want to come into this industry that they've kind of coveted from afar and have heroes and incredible sort of tutors coming in regardless of what your background is with that education. And I think they just want to get stuck in, and I think they want to make something real, and I think they want to have real interactions and have an authentic experience of everything they've sort of been kind of dancing around. And I think the agencies or studios that some people, not all, might find they're trying to succeed in a system that doesn't necessarily value or want them to, and that doesn't value that kind of new influx and is actually fearful of it. So I think the micromanaging, that could be a really a real signifier of someone that's like intimidated or doesn't know how to handle potentially kind of a threat to a system and a process that's been, kind of going for a long time. And I think there's a real big, there's almost like these two camps of like people that had a really fucking hard time coming into the industry or had a rocky road, not the biscuit, but the experience, and don't want to see other people have to go through that. And you've got other people who want to perpetuate that same journey because it validates their experience. And so I think there's people coming in who do have a really tough time, and so it doesn't surprise me, sad as it makes me to say that, but there's a bit of luck with like where you land, who you meet when you're there, and what their kind of like intentions are, and also what their like inner confidence to kind of make that a meaningful experience for you, and value that skill set, and value the opportunities ahead of you, rather than feel threatened or intimidated or yeah.
Definitely feels like value is part of it, right? Are you surprised by those experiences, Dines?
Yeah, I mean, we've had hundreds of interns for our doors at BLUP, and they're it's funny how sometimes the university partners that we have, they give us the students that are not really achieving much, and they want us to kind of give them a bit of boost and make them feel like they're worthy of this industry. But then we've also employed a lot of students from universities as juniors, right? But they started off as work experience or internships at Studio BLUP. And because I've never worked for anyone, never worked for an agency, never been in that world, it's just like, if I was a junior, what would I want when I walk through those doors to make them feel welcome? So that list of what they want is what I try to give the students, right, and the juniors, and that's coming from a loving place. But what I realised after sort of doing that for a while, and is it set a bit of a high expectation. So I've had a couple of juniors that have gone on to big things and been approached by big agencies, and big companies, because they've got the shiny Studio BLUP badge on them, right? And they've come back to me straight away and they said, like, this is nothing like it was at Studio BLUP. I was involved in projects. I felt like someone. I felt listened to. You were there for me in my personal life, and now I'm just sitting at a desk and not knowing where to go. And I kind of look back, and I was thinking, am I raising that bar so high that when they go into sort of the real world agency, it's actually dismantling them and losing their confidence? And then what balance should I give as a founder or a company owner to make sure that they are prepared to have the tools and the thick skin to go into sort of the real world agency life? So we're still sort of developing that and listening and taking that on board, but also at the same time, there needs to be those harsh truths and saying, you could also get a lot of support and you can learn but at the end of the day, everyone is working at agencies. They all have their own 9 to 5s. Everyone is busy with their own deadline, their own promotions, their own family issues. You might not get that support unless you have a student support system within that company, which is very, very rare. So again, it's just this weird middle ground which is not being addressed.
And I think if everything was unicorns and rainbows, which we both know it's not, I've never seen a rainbow or unicorn. I sound like that girl in Mean Girls. I wish it was all just unicorns and rainbows. Then, like if we were putting, pink spectacles, if it was Wednesday and we were wearing pink spectacles, we'd say, well, do you need to come down and make your experience harsher, or does everyone else need to come from that loving place? And but we both know the reality is that when you don't prepare people for the reality, which unfortunately we're aware of, it's much more about like incremental change. And I think, like you were saying before, like value is, to me, feels like such a big crux of the matter. It's like ultimately, if you don't value, whether it's because you have empathy with what it felt like to be new and to know that you wanted to make a difference, and you've still got that kind of spark before you've had a chance to get jaded or have difficult experiences or anything like that, it's like if you value that, like, we need to make space to hold on to that and welcome it in and make way. But we also need to actually value what, like, someone said something to me that I found to be true but really heartbreaking, where it was like, no one expects the junior to land an idea. And I thought, like, I don't expect the junior to land an account. I don't expect the junior to, like, absolutely boss a presentation. If they can do that, incredible, like, whatever. But I thought ideas are, like, democratic. Like, anyone can have an idea, like. And so I think the expectation and the value that we have, I feel like we're setting such a low bar in a lot of cases. And I think Dine's, like, your that loving place, as you call it, that you create those opportunities from. I think because you've never worked for someone, you've not had those experiences, you're not saying, like, okay, right, like, someone else coming in needs to be able to have grafted through this, and this, and go through this assault course of suffering. You've just done it from this really optimistic, gorgeous place, which I think a lot of people who've had those experiences are, also striving to do. But why aren't we creating this value system where both of our, people who've been in the industry for a long time or are part of, structure and, like, the infrastructure of it, why is that value not there? Because ultimately, well, not ultimately, there's no ultimate, but to me, I see sort of juniors and that fear and that intimidation and that wall of, like, here's this thing that I'm outside of. And this culture of, like, fear in them. And then there's also, like, this big culture of fear of people that are in the industry, have had these difficult experiences, afraid of it. We work in something that constantly changes, and being afraid that as soon as you've got somewhere, everything falls away or the platform changes or whatever it is. And that's actually a really universal experience. So it feels like, why can't we, find value in each other rather than it feeling like, okay, it's an obligation. We've got to make, bring juniors in. And if we do it, like, we've got to do it like this, or begrudgingly. So I think Dines is a really good example of, those people have come in and added meaning to your business, and you've, held on to them.
I do
Sorry,
think
I went on a
that
bit of a rant there.
Not at all. We love ranting. We welcome ranting. I do think that this is a question of whose responsibility is it? So the way you're talking about it, Dines, is very much like it's your responsibility to create this amazing experience for them and prepare them for what it's like to have a real job in the real world. So I want to move on. I want to move on a little bit, and I want to kind of push industry aside for a second. And I want to talk about education, something that I know you've both had a lot of experience in, and the role that education plays in truly preparing our juniors to come into industry. Because what I've been hearing from people in industry, ironically, is they don't feel like they're coming out of education particularly prepared. So I've got a voice note from Katie from Hello Katie Studio, which I'm going to play out.
I think so many graduates come out of university now missing key skills, and I'm not even sure they're entirely skills that were necessarily taught to older generations either, but we had to harness and learn them through doing work experience, where I feel a lot come out of university now having had much less work experience and then are really ill-equipped to go into agency environments where you need to be able to have more interpersonal skills to negotiate your ideas or communicate your ideas effectively. And I think then that strips confidence from people. And I think it's really hard as a graduate now to come out. There are some obviously that are super confident, and there are millions of designers that are absolutely brilliant, but unless you're able to actually communicate and rationalise your work, then I think that you'll find it harder in an agency environment, which are all pitted, usually super competitive against each other.
Really interesting, I think. So what's missing from education that makes it feel as though they're not coming out of that very expensive, very long course? Let's say again, very expensive, and this is not everybody's journey into the industry. I want to say that loud and clear, but just for the intention of this conversation, why aren't they coming out prepared and ready to go? Perfect packaged little junior designers.
Yeah, I mean that's my purpose, right? To understand this. I came out of university understanding how to send a file to a print shop. It's like, nah, I don't need that skill. Like, I can just hand it over to them, let them do their job, right? Like, it's good to know the knowledge, but I should be spending 2 weeks on learning how to set up a file for print. So for me, it was, again, it's from a place of fire where, like I said, it's what are those key skills of getting out of industry to sell your work, to have the confidence to put on the mask and actually like present your ideas to a skill to the room of experts, right? How do you get rid of imposter syndrome? How do you speak to someone that you've never met before and tell them what you do and understand what networking is? Again, money, how to charge, all this stuff was not taught. And again, I could say that I've probably lost 3 to 4 years of development because I was trying to learn this and ask the right people and scour the internet and just find all sorts of information. So again, my purpose and the mission now is to actually teach universities and teach students, or even just postgrads or even actually graduates, about what it takes to what they need for the real world, right? And it's almost like done the Dines way, the BLUP way. That's how we've labelled it. And it's very unorthodox. It's kind of sewn together. But these are the things that have worked for me. And you don't have to have, say, my confidence. You don't have to, be this silver singing and dancing. It's the basics of understanding how to get these, to get your message across, to actually get your work done, or to get to where you need to in life. So the holes in the gap, the holes in the education system. Personally, it's not the university's fault. It's not the student's fault. It's not the tutor's fault. It's no one's fault. It's just not there, right? Everyone is too busy. I'm juggling about a million other things, plus the BLUP Academy. But at the end of the day, that's the reality of it. So, if my methods can make a difference and teach these, young talent about what is needed in the real world, then if it means me staying up till 5 a.m. trying to write a program or record an episode, then that's what I need to do. So yeah, kind of sacrificing, my sleep for this future.
Is that your job? Like, is that your job though, to plug into university courses? What do you think? Like, shouldn't uni be doing the things that Dines is trying to offer and teach?
Yeah, I think what I heard from Dines is it's not his job, it's not his responsibility, but it's his purpose. And I think there's some incredible tutors within the education system who have very much taken up that mantle of, like, it's not necessarily in the curriculum, but it's my purpose because I've got this experience of the industry and this kind of understanding of the reality of it. And I think there's some people doing real above and beyond stuff in courses where the boring shit is not necessarily part of the curriculum. And I do think there's a really difficult balance, I think, with a lot of experiences in life, of whether you're preparing people in a way, especially with the education system, the cost and how much of a heavy sort of elephant in the room that is for students and tutors and the whole infrastructure around university, to feel like you're giving this really meaningful, inspiring experience to people. And I think there's a really difficult balance to strike between preparing people and scaring them. And I think we see that happen in lots of different experiences where once you get on the other side of entering it, for me it was like motherhood, you go, like, what the fuck did no one tell me about all of this fucking stuff that is like, everyone knows how impossible it is, because ultimately before you got there, it's not, well, with motherhood it's not so helpful, but with entering an industry, of course you should be prepared for how you navigate asking for a salary, how all these conversations that are like they're not things that we should be throwing people into the deep end with no experience of. It's kind of basic. And so I think there's probably a reluctance to spend so much of that kind of focus. When you're spending your budget bringing a speaker in, do you want them to talk about how they emailed someone, or do you want them to talk about the project they've just done for Dior? I think there's a real trickiness with like how you feel like you're delivering value to those students, and that kind of dynamic which kind of modern education has become. I also think it's probably a bit of a reality check, because I think no one really, so I come from more of a drama background. Well, I come from a drama background, and the course I did was performance art, which is pretty niche in the drama world. And so there was no acknowledgement that we were going to graduate and have a job. It was very much like like everyone, tutors, the whole kind of community around my course, it was accepted that you were going to work some kind of retail or service industry job. You were going to hope for some Arts Council funding. You were potentially going to ask for a pocket of funding from something else. You were going to do open mic nights. There was less of an expectation, more of a real sense of what it would take to make it. And I think we had a lot more, it wasn't perfect, believe me, but we had a lot more, I suppose, like resources and time dedicated because everyone knew that the reality of what was involved. And so it didn't feel like this kind of hushed tones thing of like, when you graduate, here's how it works. You have a placement and then they'll probably ask you to stay on, which I'm not saying everyone says it's that formulaic. But I think probably there does need to be a bit of a collective evaluation of like, hang on, we're in dire straits here. Like everyone that I'm sure each of us has spoken to is echoing a lot of the same things, saying, this is the experience I've had. That's not to be ignored. That's universal, I think, across the board in the creative industries. And ultimately, that's a problem, especially in such a like evolving industry where it's like, we need these people. It's not a service we're providing them. We need new talent. We need new perspectives. We need people from completely, to challenge us. And I think there's almost like two problems. It's like getting those people in and then giving them a fucking voice to do it. Because I think if you make it a fight to be there in the first place and then you make it a fight to be heard, like, I don't think we stand a chance, let alone them. I'm talking about we being like people that are a little bit further into their careers or potentially in decision-making, points of their careers.
I think, oh, sorry, go Dines.
Oh no, I was going to say, because it's funny, I've got a twin sister, a beautiful twin sister, and she studied performing arts in Liverpool. And she was making a name for herself out in Liverpool, right? She was getting these gigs, everyone knew her, she would walk in a club and everyone would know her. It was amazing. I think she met Amy Winehouse back in the day. And she got such a big community, she thought, I'm ready for the big lights of London where we're from. So she moved back home, and then all of a sudden she found herself competing against a million other people trying to fight for this one spot. And like you said, Ellen, it's the performing arts is a reality of what is taught, and the not low expectation, but it's like the more work you put in, the bigger you're going to be. But sometimes it is like, but that's the truth. That's a pure truth. And then you're out there in the real world, knowing that you have the talent alone to go out there and flourish. So I think if we actually applied that, you're 100% correct. If you applied this kind of philosophy into the academic space, by giving you that dose of reality and a dose of hustler mentality, and I think it just lowers that expectation to make sure you achieve a lot more when you graduate.
Yeah, and I think if you gloss over things because you don't want to make people, and especially like off the back of the pandemic, I think, students having slightly less confidence because they've, not had as much of that real, like interaction with people and being in the same fucking room as, sorry, I'm swearing all the time, being in the same room as people. I like to sit up and start swearing when I go in. There's already like a confidence issue that I really feel through my sort of, teaching and experience in education. I think there's, a instinct potentially to like gloss over how hard it can potentially be. But then, what happens when you don't collectively acknowledge the reality of that is people start to have imposter syndrome, start to feel not good enough because they think, oh, it's like this and I'm just not good enough, or I just don't have all these skills, or, this person is just lucky when it could be an incredible list of privileges. And so I think a reality check feels like sensible at this point. And from my experience, I know that, I graduated into a recession, as I said before, and had, it sounds like me and Diane's sister were probably on the same circuit at certain points, but had experiences that were really fucking tough, but I was, expectant of, and felt a sort of, a shared experience with my peers, and didn't feel that sense of competition and like, oh my God, they got that gig, it's just me. And so, yeah, I think I don't know how we kind of administer that because, it's,
I do have I'm going to move us on. I think we could talk about education for a really, really long time. But I just wanted to mention that somebody had said on the gram that they were questioning whether university was the right place to hire juniors from at this point, and that they were finding that maybe looking at grads that had come through different programs like Shillington, or people that had had career changes, were a little bit more rounded and a little bit more ready to go. So just wanted to say that before I move on to our next topic, which is, are we failing them as studios? This is something that we've touched on already, but we kind of need to think about it from the point of view of being a studio in this day and age, right? Being a studio right now is hard out there, like we've already said. So Anonymous has submitted saying, in this economic climate, it's just not possible to dedicate the same time to juniors as we used to. They need to come in and be instantly billable. Clients wanting more is putting more pressure on studios to be lean. So what do we think about that? Like the pressure on studios, the financial pressure, the risk of taking on juniors, it's tricky, it's hard.
Yeah, I think you have a lot more. You have a lot more to lose if a project goes wrong. So, for example, we worked with a really big, really big client, and it went wrong because we put too much on the junior and expected too much, and they kind of buckled under the pressure of delivering the work at a high enough quality. So then in the end, we had to kind of drag our seniors in and to help them out and teach them on the way. And I think it is their kind of responsibility of the company to understand that the junior doesn't actually know that much and the levels that needs to be achieved until they're in it, and they have to learn from their mistakes. So when that client luckily signed off the project, we had a bit more of a rewind and said, like, okay, where did it go wrong, what did you need help and what did you need support on? And ultimately it was more training. We were asking this 3D designer to kind of go outside their comfort zone, and they didn't want to say no, and they tried it, and it was taking them so long, and like the renders time and everything, and it was just going over. And I think it was about the transparency, but again it was the pressure of them saying, yeah, I can do it, yeah. I mean, I'm all for saying yes, but understanding that this could damage the company long term. So then that kind of unfortunately had a bit of a knock on, okay, how much trust can I give a junior designer or an intern? And that's when we realised, okay, there's levels to this game, and we thought, okay, instead of them doing the practical work, what about if we bring them into the meetings and helping us with the research and doing the more stuff that actually helps them develop more as a creative rather than a technician, and seeing little niches that they can develop and grow without the pressure of delivering something that's tangible, okay? And ultimately that's the experience, that's what the learning curve is. And when we understood that, we said, okay, this is what the junior role is, and if they're exceptional at what they do, then we bring them in. If they're a good photographer, a good poet, or whatever, a good writer, we shine those skills that they have. But if they're not 100% sure on it, we can bring them back to the basics and teach them what else they need and what skills they need to develop.
Yeah.
That.
I think that's awesome from a small point of view, like your point of view is not small, from a smaller studio point of view, right? Like you can be a little bit more nimble, you can be a little bit more reactive to the specific type of placement or junior that you've got in. Let's talk about big agencies. The agencies that used to maybe have a big mentorship program, or they would have like an assigned person that would look after, and now actually their placements, accounts are billing for them, right? And the juniors. So, and they're just doing shit jobs, right? So that they can charge money out for them. So what should they be doing better? What can the big studios be doing better?
Well, I think if we take it at like placement level, not necessarily like people that have been brought in as like a kind of, legit official junior permanent contract role, I think there's a lot of, anecdotally, not going to name any names, I think there's a lot of big agencies, network agencies particular, who do have placement programs, and it's like very much part of their, kind of structure and an intake, and, it's all quite established. And I think there's a lot of people who are going on those placements and being given, briefs from a few years ago, or being given kind of, placeholder tasks, potentially being left kind of like unsupervised, and not, being allowed a seat at the table. And I completely understand that it might not be, to Dines's point around like, it might not be appropriate for them to deliver the project, and that might actually be counterintuitive because it's too much pressure. You can't learn when you're like, under that much pressure. But you don't necessarily have to give them like a seat at the table and, that kind of pressure, but you can let them be in the room where the table is. And so it's these, for those, and I think there's a lot of that happening where it's kind of performative, having those placements and saying that you've got that program. And I think you don't have to give someone a live brief and, make it a billable thing to add value. And it is really tricky, but I think where there are agencies who've got big retainers and big clients, and it's a little bit easier to get lost in there, the value might not be exposure to projects where you're having such an active kind of like sleeves rolled up and you're head to head with the ECD, but again giving them opportunities to ask questions and soak the process in by osmosis. Yep, if they've got to go and do some stuff that justifies their salary in that kind of like junior role, then make space for where you can give them stuff in a kind of really passive way that's easy for you. And I think again that comes down to seeing the junior experience and not just seeing the kind of bottom line attached to it. So I think they can be, if you're going to do it right, if you're going to have any kind of like junior program or placement program, then I think reevaluating it every however often to make sure that it's as useful as it can be. But also like on a personal level, what I talked about before, if you're at a big agency and you've enjoyed success, if someone asks you to come and do a talk, how about you just take a notch down from your ego for a second and you share something that's going to be really fucking helpful for the people that will be in the room who are engaged and have got their notebooks. You don't always have to, come and represent the agency in a really big and kind of lofty way. I think there are small ways that a big agency could have that impact. And, yeah, I'm rambling now, but
That's spot on, and that's perfect for what a big agency should be doing. Like I said, I've never even stepped foot in a big agency as an employee or like work experience, because that pure again the pure frustration of knowing what's going to happen. So I've approached this from, okay, what if I was that junior or that intern and I've got an opportunity to work at a big agency, how can I spin it? And what advice can I give as science to the student to say, okay, how do you shine so bright that they want you? Okay, so the first thing I'll do is, and this is what I encourage every student, is to go in with a list of questions of what they actually want to achieve from this internship or this job, all right? And it's not just putting them on the spot and saying, what do you want? Give them time to prepare, and where do you want to be in 3 years within this agency? What role would you want to be? And then you as a student, you won't know. I don't know what a senior designer does or a creative director does. I'm just going in and just designing and working my way up. So the best thing is just to understand, okay, so what is your strengths and how do you get recognized? How do you stop that creative director walking past without even knowing your name? Okay, so how do you shine, and what is it you need to do to be noticed? And that's then looking into your skill set and then finding that one person that can help guide you, that can help mentor you, being a bit of a nuisance, but just keep knocking, pulling on their coattails and saying, what else can I do? Be hungry. Don't just accept the job that they're giving you. Because I love when young talent go out their way. And actually I had a really good group of interns, and they came in, and the first thing they did was gave me a pair of white Nike Air Forces and painted it with my favourite Pokemon character and put Dines on it. And I was like, you know what? This is making you stand out from the rest. It's that little detail that's made me remember you for the rest of my life. And they've done that from a place of just obviously from fear from the heart, but they want to be embedded into this company. So if you can apply that to your agency and be noticed, then eventually you will shine so bright that they will know your name, and then you will be that speaker on stage that Ellen said that's talking about their company. one day.
Yeah, that's nice and optimistic, isn't it? I wonder what I've got to do to get a pair of trainers. Right, I've got my last lofty question to wrap us up. And that is, and this is kind of including everyone that's listening, are we all failing them? Are we all failing our juniors? So I've got a submission from Laura who said, I've had experiences with the new generation of interns who seem less motivated by opportunities. Is COVID still having an impact? Is the online world contributing to the instant gratification expectancies? Am I becoming the new wave of grumpy old designer? So when we read that, I put up a poll on our Instagram and I just asked who had it easier? What generation of juniors had it the easiest? 39% of people said 20 years ago they had it the easiest. 36% of people said 10 years ago, and 25% of people said now. So we can pretty much say that a quarter of people reckon that today's juniors have got it easier, and everyone else thinks actually it's harder now. So what's going on? Are the veteran creatives just so jaded and they really want all these juniors to have those horrible, hard experiences that they had? Are they bringing all their baggage and their resentment? What part are we all playing in our juniors not succeeding? Big question, I know.
Go on.
Well, I think there's a real miscommunication a lot of times between what we're maybe terming there as the jaded dinosaurs, if you like, and the kind of new wave. And I think there's a lot of a new setting of standards, particularly around, post-COVID, about flexibility, about, anti-grind culture. I think about, going against lots of things that were established in, that 20 years ago generation. And I think there's a lot of people who have gone through that and who feel that they've, worked for their place in the world, in the professional world, who potentially read, the new wave, having these standards, having these shifting values and this, potentially evolving ethos away from that as, entitlement or diva-dom, if you like. I think there is, education and the kind of dynamic that I talked about before of that, the student is the customer potentially, and the money and the value exchange that's involved in that, I think has really changed. Certainly I've experienced the kind of attitude that and the engagement level that students potentially have now in feeling like education is something to be bestowed on them. I know in my day and age, it was definitely something where it felt more like you claimed it. You turned up to whatever lecture that you had with your notebook, you researched that person, you sent them an email, you did your background checks, you took everything in a very active mindset. Obviously, I can't speak for every single person that's ever gone to university in my millennial generation, but it did feel much more like the onus was on us to kind of claim that education. So I think there's a bit of a disconnect between the value system from, where this kind of modern industry was established and the new wave. And I think I sort of touched on it before, of that almost intergenerational trauma of, potentially a lot of the people who are coming in feeling more empowered and, they don't need the creative industry to give them license to practice creativity. They can do that as content creators. They can do that as entrepreneurs. They can do that as freelancers from the off if they have the confidence to do so. And I think that's, an incredible, kind of opening up of the industry. I think there is a little bit of reluctance to accept that it might be easier for the generation to have a voice and to not have to go through that hardship in the same way. And so I think that's creating this kind of chasm. And I think people like Dines and people that come to it with a very different attitude, obviously, not putting you under that banner. So I think we are, coming back to your question, I think there's a lot of failure going on, but I think we're also failing ourselves by not all shifting forward, because ultimately, whatever you experienced coming into the industry or making a name for yourself, no matter how hard it is, you can also be part of whatever it is going forward. So if the new wave is more aligned with something that feels more rewarding and is potentially, having this power flip where it's like, actually, should we all be working late, or should we be working meaningful? Should we all be like hustling and expecting so much from ourselves, or could it all be about respect? Again, talking very rainbows and unicorns again. But if you're part of changing that for those people, it doesn't invalidate your experience. It only makes the experience you're going to have going forward in your career, whatever stage you're at, more meaningful. So I think it's a bit of short-sightedness, I think, from those people, but it's really hard to grapple with people's egos, or, you know, lots of people have really struggled to get where they are and don't necessarily have the awareness of what it means to change that for others.
Yeah, great answer. And I'll come from it from a midweight senior designer, or someone who's been in the industry, and what they can do to help, right? And at the end of the day, we've discussed this before, everyone has their own individual problems and stresses in life, and I understand, you know, you've got stresses of hitting deadlines, you've got potential family, partner problems, whatever, and you're coming into work and you're trying to deliver, so you've got all this happening around you to care about what's happening underneath. And I think, you know, the journey that I went through in terms of understanding what my purpose is, and, you know, how do I protect the new generation of creative talent, and what do I need to do to make sure, you know, they are in this world a happy place, right? So if I'm sitting at my desk and I'm creating a brief and I've got a junior next to me, ask the question and say, like, I was in that person's position once. What can I do to help you? Listen to them, guide them, help them, become a mentor, and knowing that you're not just brushing them aside just because you've got your own sort of deadlines and problems to have. And I think the question there is, like, how do big agencies make that an incentive for those senior designers to help the younger talent? You know, we need to look from the top to help the bottom, and, you know, not just because it's in your job description that you have to help. Give them either, you know, a financial reward, or even if it's financial, it's still coming not from the heart. How do we motivate the team within to help develop these talent? And it's finding the time to do that and creating a plan, you know. And this is why, again, with the BLUP Academy is, you know, we want to, we're playing and we're toying with it, and again, it might be too much, where, you know, we are those people within the industry, within the agencies, and training up the juniors to make sure that they're producing good work for their creative directors within the agency. And there is that gap there that it might actually have to be an external company to come in to help make sure these kids are having the right futures looked after. Because if we aren't doing it, or externals aren't doing it, then no one has all got time to do it.
Such nice answers. That's super optimistic. So I'm gonna bring us to a close. And I just wanted to, for the first time this season, kind of pose a question back to our listeners. I had a few messages that were a little bit Gen Z don't have the work ethic and their expectations are too high. And I guess I just want to say, if you are one of those people that has that internal voice, you might not be saying it out loud, but that is how you feel, and you wish that they understood that you had to file all the books in the studio in colour order, and you had to do all the tea runs, and you had to work 12-hour shifts, just to ask yourself why you're wishing that experience on our new generation of creatives. And then finally, when was the last time that you helped out one of our junior designers and one of our young creatives in the industry? And if everyone that's still here with us at the end of the episode were to reach out to somebody and offer a hand, how nice a thing to come out of this chat that would be. Thanks, team. What a good episode. So yeah, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it.